Can you believe it? This is the last Bible in a Minute for the book of Genesis. We are in Genesis chapter 50, and this is the end of the book, right? And so what we find in this book is Jacob dies. He finally passes away. Joseph orders that his father be embalmed, which is a 40-day process. Which is pretty wild that it takes that long, but the whole process of mummification apparently took 40 days, so that's what they took. Then in verse 3, it says, then the Egyptians mourned for him for 70 days, right? So now a total of 110 days has passed from the time he died until the time of their mourning is complete. When that period of mourning is over, Joseph goes and talks to Pharaoh and says, hey, look, my dad made me promise not to bury him here, but to bury him where his father and grandfather, Abraham and Isaac, are buried. So he made me swear an oath. Can I go back? Pharaoh's like, hey, totally. Go bury your father as he made you promise. So in verse 7, Joseph goes up to bury his father with a ton of Pharaoh's servants, the leaders of Joseph's household, leaders in the land of Egypt, along with Jacob's family, and this massive caravan pushes from Egypt into Canaan to the city of Hebron, where Abraham, Sarah, and Isaac and Rebekah have all been buried. And so they, in verse 10, they are in mourning for 7 days. Now, this is the earliest indication of a period of mourning within Judaism, that there's a fixed amount of time. And this is, I assume, someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I would assume this is where we get the concept within Judaism of sitting Shiva, where you're actually mourning someone for 7 days, a full week of mourning, because that's what they did for Jacob. And so his sons buried him, and they put him in the cave in the field that Abraham had bought for Sarah originally, and they were all buried there. But then what's really interesting is that in some translations, verse 15 is the very first what if in the Bible. Now, in some translations, they don't have the phrase what if, but the concept is still there, because essentially Joseph's brothers realize, what if Joseph doesn't act favorably towards us anymore now that our father is dead? What if Joseph hates us and pays us back for what we did to him? And so they send a message to Joseph, because again, he's second in command of all Egypt, so it's not like they could just kind of walk into his office or anything. But they're like, hey, your father, notice this is what they said in verse 16, your father gave us this order before he died. Say to Joseph, I beg you now, please forgive your brother's crime and the wickedness in doing you harm. So now we beg you to forgive us of the crime that we committed against you. And Joseph weeps. First of all, there's no record that Jacob actually said that, but they want to make sure that Joseph is not going to come at them. Maybe Jacob did. We don't know. It's not recorded in the Bible, only that the brothers say that Jacob said it. And so Joseph weeps at this news, because he has done so much for them, so much for their families. He's provided for them, given them this place in Egypt that is great for being shepherds, this lush area that they're living in, and everything they need is provided for. And so he finally says in verse 19, sorry, my shoulder is getting tired. He says in verse 19, don't be afraid. I'm not in God's place. I'm not here to judge you. Verse 20, you meant to do me harm, but God meant it for good, so that it would come about as it is today, with many people's lives being saved, not just Egyptians, but yours and your families and generations are saved because of the harm that was done to Joseph. I mean, think about that perspective. How many times bad things happen to us? Somebody else gets a promotion, somebody else gets the job we want, the duty station if you're in the military, the promotion, the award, the recognition that we want. Bad things happen to us. Somebody who's wicked is healthy, and righteous people get sick with cancer or whatever. And we look at that and think, it would be easy for us to be upset about all that. But Joseph has the right perspective. He says, look, like, your motives were bad. Not gonna lie. Being totally honest, you have bad motives, but God is the one that actually orchestrated this whole thing so that I will be sent to Egypt ahead of you to save you, save your families, and save all these people. So verse 21, don't be afraid, for I will provide for you. I will provide for your little ones. And it says in this way, he comforted them, speaking kindly to them. And I think that is a great perspective for us to have anytime bad things happen to us, disappointment happens to us, and folks, life is full of disappointment, frustration. But realize that as a believer, that God is ultimately in control of our lives, that we surrender to his control, and that he's going to put us exactly where he needs us. And we might be suffering through a cancer diagnosis. We might be suffering in chemo treatments, but we're going to be sitting next to someone who has no faith, who is possibly going to die and meet their maker. And we get to witness to them and minister to them. And we would never have the opportunity to do so otherwise, had we not been in that exact place. And so, does God want to give you cancer? No, but he also wants other people to hear the gospel and to be saved. And so he can use medical science to heal us. He can heal us as a miracle in and of itself. But he'll put us exactly where he wants us and needs us to minister to other people. I've said it before. I can't remember if it was in this video series or the video series on Ephesians. God is not ultimately concerned with your personal comfort. What he's concerned about is saving your soul and the souls of other people that we come in contact with. So that is Genesis chapter 50. We are done with Genesis. So I probably will start the Bible in a Minute series in the book of Exodus. And then what I'm really thinking about doing is starting a chronological series through the Gospels of what Jesus, what he does. Where he goes and who he interacts with and all this stuff. So it's one of my favorite things to do, is go through the Gospels chronologically, or as chronologically as we possibly can figure out. And because there's so much that you can learn through that series. So stay tuned. Make sure you like, subscribe, follow, you know the drill. And hope that you're encouraged by these videos. God bless and have a great day.